Welcome to the 4 Pillars of Men's Health, a podcast of resources for restoring vigor and vitality, bringing you top influencers in the men's health arena, case studies of men who have succeeded and how they did it, and cutting-edge teaching on men's health issues from America's leading men's health guru, Dave Skattum. Get ready to take steps towards good health. Here's your host, Dave Skattum.
And welcome to the 4 Pillars of Men's Health. This is Dave Skattum. I'm so excited about this interview that we have lined up for today. But over the last couple of sessions, we've been talking about the impact of a strong immune system and the impact of a weak immune system on our lives and on our health. And it's just such a powerful topic. And I hope you've really gotten into this and taken some of these ideas that we've talked about by Jacobus and by Dr. Furman and really implemented them into your life. And if you haven't listened to those podcasts, you should, because those two guys have some really great things to say about immune systems and building immune systems and how they impact us and those kinds of things. But today we're going to be talking to a guy who has, just like me and you, has just been through some dark places in his life with immune issues. And I'm so excited to be bringing this guy to you because I know where he's been, and it's been some really hard things. And he's done some things in his life that have brought him to a new place. And even though maybe not 100% where he wants to be, but he's moving in that direction. And I know this is a huge issue for a lot of people, and I know this guy is going to bring a lot of hope and a lot of help to many of us who are struggling with immune system issues. And this guy's name is Rich Valiant, and I've known him for several years, and he's just a fabulously nice guy in the first place. But I know that he's gained so much wisdom and so much knowledge about immune systems and how they work, and how weak immune systems work and how strong immune systems work and how to capitalize on each one of those. And Rich, I am so glad to have you here. Why don't you just give us a little bit of an introduction of who you are? What have you been up to the last little while? And I'm sure happy that you're here, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation. But welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, hello, everyone listening. My name is Rich, just like Dave said, and thank you, Dave, for having me on the podcast. I'm really excited. As you've already stated, we've known each other for several years, and so I've seen this coming down the pipe for a while, you being, again, I never had the right word as to the elitist in the runner's field, but you do those elite kind of running programs, and so I knew. Yeah. And of course, I've been a part of some of your programs, so I knew that this was coming. 4 Pillars of Men's Health is exciting. As for me, I've been currently working on becoming a member of, again, the elitist 5 a.m. club. So It's astonishing to have. Yeah, I know. It's astonishing to have come from an autoimmune disease place for decades, and now in this stage of life, come to such healing that I've transformed my life from being an entertainment artist and a night owl who, is depressed at night, can't fall asleep, creative at nights, this kind of out of control genius, and then waking up like a sloth whenever it happened, and transforming to now it's at 10 p.m. sleep time, sometimes even 9, and waking up at 5 every morning. So it's a amazing transformation, and I'm taking it with ease. I think that's what the journey has taught me is to, for myself, put away that high achiever mentality of going hard to the grindstone with every single project and iteration of my mind, body, or spirit, and just take it with ease. So every day I wake up at 5, but sometimes I take a nap somewhere in between that 5 to 10 a.m. routine I have, and I'm just building up the structure. And one day it's going to be just gridiron solid, but it doesn't have to be that overnight. So it's exciting.
Yeah, something that is so incredible, Rich. Something that you just said in there. You said that you were, I believe the words you used were a creative Slav. Is that what you said? I think that's what you said.
Well, I was saying that the creative industry sometimes, since it's been an industry that's been denied as far as the creatives, now you're starting to see the work field embrace the creatives. But I was brought up in a generation where the creatives were essentially hated. It's just the rebel, the outside group. I mean, you were hated in churches, you were hated in the work field, and you did most of your work at nights when the sun went down and everyone was sleeping. You just got into your genius mode. But that was also the time where you're feeling depressed if you're going through physical things or if you haven't hit your stride of success. And then you wake up with such sluggish and slothfulness where it's almost like a sloth. Who knows when you wake up? You're not waking up with inspiration. You didn't go to sleep with your best aim. You did your greatest work, but you also had your manic depressive moments, and you woke up somewhere between, 10 and 2 p.m. It's that kind of field, or it was that kind of field with the creatives, with having, because to be a creative, you have to really tap into your emotion. Emotions are a thing that in the industrial age and soon after that we denied. Creatives were something that we hated. All these forbidden fruits kind of things. And now we're starting to educate with mental health. We're on a global scale. We're consciously becoming aware of spirit. It's not just a taboo topic inside of select churches. So collectively, that side of things was so denied that we had self-denial, and that turned into physical injury. And whenever you have pent-up emotions or undealt with trauma or unresolved, unspoken word within yourself, when you have that kind of self-denial, it turns into self-hatred, because self-denial is really, in a sense, a bridge towards self-hatred. If it's a part of you actually love, but you're denying because someone told you it was wrong, then you're becoming your own jailer. And when it comes to blaming someone, you end up blaming yourself. So self-hatred begins. And the only way this message can seep out of your unconsciousness is through physical ailments. And so you see the reverberation of inside trauma starting to escape itself through physical pain and suffering, and ultimately to some kind of chronic illness, disease, autoimmunity, etc. So to me, that was the beginning of my course of action of how it's got led to an autoimmune issue.
Wow. So you just said that you got through some pretty hard times, and I know there's people out there listening that are saying, wow, I was in some dark times. What was it like, some of your darkest times, and what exactly, and now that you're able to look back on that, what do you see was going on in your body and in your emotions and in your whole being? What was going on in those darkest times that led to the despair and this darkness that you experienced?
I think it's interesting that at some point I chose music as my creative expression or outlet, because in music you're able to create a persona. As a matter of fact, usually you typically do. There's not too many, if any, artists that truly represents themselves, even if they're using their own namesake. It's still a stage performance persona. And this is the way that people begin to know you. This is the way that you're able to go out into the world and have a sort of shell around your sensitive nature or your sensitive work. So I had been going through trauma since the very beginning, and I'll skip around to the timeline because while it's all important, it's too long to go through. But even in the beginning, having been born to a 16-year-old woman out of wedlock, that kind of rushed feeling, that being born, premature. So I was in and out of the hospital when I was a baby and a boy, and that kind of that thread continued on. There was all kind of molestation and abuse. And so that thread continued. There was early uprising in a very legalistic church where everything was wrong. So that kind of thread continued. And then finally you end up being in high school and you find an outlet. You choose a career, and I chose music and film. And that initially gave me a persona, like I said. So I had confidence. But the whole time looking back, I had dissonance because I was always sick in my body. And I always felt the threat of succeeding faster than I did die. Because I for sure knew if I didn't get adequate amounts of help, my body was systematically shutting down. And each year would become worse. So I remember towards the end of my 20s when I was in the Atlanta industry and performing with a band and being represented by different agencies and talent groups, every year got worse. So I remember by the end of that 29-ish year, I spent the first 8 months of that year, 3 weeks out of every month in bed with some illness. Every time I stepped outside the door, I caught something that was in the air, then I would be back in the bed. And this is what I did. And I remember finally around 30, I was represented by the top talent agency for film in Atlanta, and I was doing film work. And I was just, it was no longer a persona, it was just the last inch of hope. I was almost crossing the finish line where I thought, okay, this is it. I'm inside the industry. All I need is enough work. Then I would pursue my acting career and get healing. I always thought you needed to succeed first in order to be worthy of healing. I'm not sure where that paradigm came in, but I was brought up with a serve first, deny self mentality, and then after you've done everything for everyone else, you can worry about yourself. So I was close to finally succeeding, so then I can finally focus on me. And it didn't happen. I ended up moving to LA to seek out my acting career because I hit a ceiling in Atlanta. I did enough work there. There was no more work, so I went out to Atlanta, and my body completely just crashed. Fast forward, so there was no seeking acting opportunity. The dream was gone. I finally made it to quote unquote the promised land, and as soon as I arrived out on the doorstep, the body gave out. So I wasn't able to act.
Wow.
So I had spent the last 15 years seeking a dream that I couldn't pursue at the doorsteps of the dream. So I ended up back in Oregon, and luckily I finally found a doctor who said, just because my husband has an extreme form of IBS to where he needs a handicap sticker on his car because he can't hold his bowels if it happens, he needs to rush into a supermarket and go to the bathroom. He has chronic bowel issues, gut issues, autoimmune issues, etc. She said, because I know, I'm looking at your body, and you're lucky you found me because you're on the way to dying. But I think that
really,
I think that your root cause is actually celiac disease. I think that this is your root cause. I'm looking at all your various symptoms and all systematically how everything's shutting down, and it's been over decades, but I think the root cause is this. So she did a bunch of tests, and this is just slightly before the celiac disease side of the autoimmune community awareness was so prevalent that now you can go to a store and there's all kind of options. But at this point, it wasn't that way. There weren't options. It wasn't like, oh, that you're fine now. It wasn't that. First of all, I was 115 pounds with multiple injuries across my body and sick with everything possible. The immune system was already down at that point. So there was no, just eat well and you'll be fine. There was going to be a long journey of recovering.
Yeah.
But just knowing that there was an avenue and answer, at least one way, that brought tremendous hope because I had spent my whole life not knowing what was wrong with me. I remember being young and having immense physical trauma symptoms in my belly and my body where I would just be 12 years old going to the bathroom. And it wasn't just going to the bathroom. It was an hour painful experience where my whole body would ache with pains. And then afterwards being made fun of everyone because no one really understood. And so it's suffering on top of suffering, insults on top of injury. So you felt odd and disgusting. I mean, it was already disgusting and frustrating to go through these kinds of experiences. They're very vulnerable experiences. But then to be ashamed on top of it is horrible. It's horrifying. So it becomes a part of your identity. Things like food and speaking, breathing, walking, going to the bathroom, showering. These kinds of things are so innate and in our culture, nature, and understanding that if they become crippled, it becomes a root part of your identity, the way you view yourself in the mirror, the way you view yourself from the world perspective. So it can be very crippling on an intellectual, emotional, spiritual identity kind of level. So I went through all that, but the exciting thing was to have just an avenue, just one way where you thought, this doesn't answer everything, but if this is a road that finally produces some results, this is going to be an incredible life. And the choice was, I remember going to the nutritionist, and she said something really astonishing. She said, this is going to be really difficult, and you're not going to see results. Maybe you'll see a tiny bit of results after a year, but it's going to take a long haul of doing the right thing. And I explained to her just how emotionally charged I was that I had an avenue, because I spent decades suffering with no answer and no hope of ever changing anything. And she said, it's interesting. Out of all of the category of people that I receive, it's people with your kind of condition who come in with the same kind of optimism for living. And if you keep that optimism and you treat yourself well, look at yourself with love and happiness, and take all the time that you need, then you're going to recover well. And that was the beginning of doing just that, of turning inward and saying, okay, now it's me first time. And shockingly, even before career and dream, it was before people, before things, before religion, before man, before family, before community, before dream. It was me first. It was heal. Just love yourself as long as it takes. And I tell you, took a long time, because this 5 a.m. morning wake-up call, it's 7 years after my diagnosis and doing the right thing. So,
wow. Yeah. So, Rich, the thing that you said that just grabbed me was, a couple phrases you used. You said the last inch of hope, and then you said you moved to LA, and it was like you made it to the doorstep of your dream, and then all your dreams were lost because of this health issue. And that to me, that's that's one of the the bullseye of what propels me in this direction of helping guys take steps towards good health, because I've seen not as severe, or not exactly like you experienced, but there's so many guys out there who have been had these dreams like you were talking about, and because of, for you it was maybe some health choices, but a lot of your issues were just dumped on you by life. And but whether it's your poor choices or stuff dumped on you, it crushes dreams. It takes dreams away from us. And man, to me, that's the core of what I'm doing here. And so I'm really, I hear the story about this darkness and this horrible place that you've been, but I know you now, and I know things aren't maybe exactly like you want them to be, but I know that you are doing pretty well in your life right now. And so we've talked, we've kind of been in a dark valley here with your life. Tell us a little bit about coming out of that. How did that, you mentioned you met this nutritionist who told you that, this is the truth. It's going to be a long, difficult haul. But what are some of the things that you did to get from that quagmire to now you're getting up early in the morning, you're being productive. I know you're a fairly healthy guy, and what did you do? What happened there?
I think two words sum it up, and it's self-love. Because we were talking about self-denial and how self-denial turns into self-hatred, and how self-hatred becomes unconscious in the sense of desires that are no longer remembered, that are the highest value to the very person who's holding them back. And that kind of dissonance within yourself then reverberates into physical illness, because the truth has to always come out. So self-love was the beginning of the journey. It was literally treating myself like a patient. I think that's literally it. I was my own doctor, and I treated myself like a patient. I was gentle and kind with myself, and not always, because sometimes the pain was so severe you snap back into the jailer. But then I would snap back into, this is okay, and I'm your doctor, you're the patient. I remember this time during the healing journey. So the healing process, at some point, you start to feel good because some things change. But when you get to the underlying gunk, I mean, it comes out like venom. So after feeling healing in certain areas, I started to do more things like the AIP, or autoimmune protocol paleo diets, which was helpful, and she assisted me through this. I stopped working, and she was working, so I stayed home to rest more. But then all of that rest and right dieting brought up all of the venomous roots, and for a while there, I was experiencing the symptoms of years of neglect. And I remember for 3 weeks or I should say 3 days at a time, this was the interval. It was 3 days lying awake, and then on the fourth day I would fall asleep, and that's how it happened. And now every night I would try to go to sleep. My eyes would be swollen, hurting. I would be desperate for sleep, but I couldn't sleep. And on the third day, third to the fourth, I would fall asleep, and the cycle would happen again. And this happened over the course of 3 months. So I remember by the third month, you're starting to feel very delusional. I mean, very delusional. So I remember early in my life, there was a time where the spirit of suicide tried to meet me in the road of suffering. And I fought it, and so it never came back. But this was interesting because the spirit of suicide visited me on a few nights during that 3 months, and it came as the voice of reason. It was different than before when it met me 10 years before this moment, and I was having all kind of family drama, physical pain, homelessness, defeat, and all these things. This time I was healing myself on the journey, suffering the consequences of uprooting trauma and neglect and all these other things. And the whisper was, hey, Rich, you've done a really great job. You actually love yourself now. It's been a long journey. I think no one, even God, would excuse you, or should I say, would look down on you for excusing yourself from life at this moment. This would be a kind of justice. This would be a kind of fair play. And so while I'm delusional and my eyes are swollen, and it's been the third month of 3 days non-sleeping and then sleeping and all this kinds of things, I had to tell myself, I hear you, to this voice, I hear you, but just hold on, Rich. You have about 3 or 4 hours left, and you know that even if you don't sleep, every time you see the sun in the morning, you're reminded about this joyous journey that you're on of self-love.
I'm hearing a couple things from you. The first thing was recognizing how important you are as a person in our world, in our society. It sounded like that was one of the first realizations that you came to. Am I hearing that right?
Yes, I had to feel that I existed, that I mattered, that I was important, because everything had taught me not to exist, from family, society, religion. All of it said, you don't exist, you're only here to serve others. Sure, you're sick, so is everyone else. Get over it. Until you're dying and you don't have a choice. I remember basically what the initial doctor told me, which I found very special and exciting. Because I needed a reason. Sometimes you need a reason that rebuffs the reasoning you had before. So if someone programmed you with a message of, you're not worthy, you're here just for others, and to think of yourself as selfishness, and you're sick, and they're saying, so is everyone else, get over it, then if you are on the deathbed and the doctor comes and she tells me this, she says, your body, you made it to me just in time, but you're not out of the woods. Yeah, I'm paraphrasing here, but this is what she told me.
Right.
She said, you're going to have to do certain things, and you're going to have to do them without fail. And what I took that as a message was, you're going to have to love yourself more than anybody else. So basically, you're going to have to tell everyone, hey, you're going to have to make accommodations for me because I exist, I matter, I don't want to die. I don't think life or God or myself or anything that's really representative of love wants me to die. So now the argument isn't everyone else is first or this, that, or the other, or get over yourself. If I want to live, I have to love myself. So I choose love. Now the argument was, I have enough reason to believe we're supposed to be here to love ourselves. We're supposed to exist. We're supposed to matter. We're supposed to love ourselves first. We're supposed to be well. And we don't have to ask permission or forgiveness. This is our natural born rights. This is what it is to be human, to be a human being. So I took that paradigm shift to finally say, hey, and mine was a drastic matter. So I was surrounded by self-hatred. I had to completely shift, but this was the reason that allowed me to shift. Almost dying allowed me to shift. Choosing, if you don't want to die, that means you want to live. If you want to live, you have to keep up a certain kind of lifestyle standard in order to live. And if you keep up that standard, a bunch of people that used to love you because you neglected yourself are going to hate you because you love yourself. So now you're going to have to be able to tell everyone, hey, if this is the kind of love you're giving me, I choose to do without it. So I cut everybody out that I knew out of my life. I cut off the places I had been from, the people that I knew, the family members, everything. I rebooted my life and started completely over. And I was just beginning to discover what foods are good for my body, what thoughts are good for my body, what practices, environments, attitudes, what people, places, things, what gifts, what talents, what things are good for my body. And if I wasn't born where I was born, programmed the way I was programmed, brought up the way I was brought up, experienced what I experienced, and started over now as a fresh new being, what truly would be my default message from a place of love? What would be the options I would make? And I started to make new decisions that altered everything.
Yeah. So I'm hearing that message is that needs to be a place where you start is recognizing your own real worth. I think that's so critical.
Absolutely.
Another thing you mentioned was, and I'm curious about your thoughts on this and how this idea impacted your recovery. You mentioned that you uprooted this trauma. You had severe trauma in your past. Was that part of your journey to healing, or am I misunderstanding that? Or when you said you uprooted this trauma, did you feel like that was a necessary step, or how did that happen in your life?
Yeah, that's been an underlying message in everything I've said so far, because it's kind of a progressive journey into consciousness or into alertness or awakeness or awareness. So I was bringing, initially, what you can do is begin to recognize that's the only way to succeed is to love yourself. If you're on that journey where you're sick and in a sense you're abusing yourself and allowing everyone else to abuse you because of bad programming, or ignorance or lack of knowledge, etc. So you turn on the self-love switch, which is a paradigm shift. That self-love switch is going to switch the way you behave everywhere you've been, with everyone you've been, every single object in your life, every single relationship, people, places, things. And so now you're going to be given new information back and have to make new decisions based upon self-love. So you begin to remove things that no longer resonate with this new self-love message or practice that you're practicing. Now, once you remove those things, you begin to surround yourself with right thinking, right practices, right diet, right exercise, right people, places, things that support and surround your journey. Now, when you're in that safe place, you begin to truly unearth the roots level of the corruption seeds that had produced the old place, the old people, places, things, paradigms, programs, and sicknesses. Because sickness doesn't just arrive on the scene. Sickness arrives as a response. Sometimes that's immediate, but ultimately sickness for most people happens over time, and then ultimate disease or chronic illness or things that are way more severe on the sickness scale, they usually take decades of time to arrive. And they're usually the culmination of a ton of neglect and abuse and trauma, whether that's through ignorance, bad programming, etc. So I'm at this 7-year point. I would say that the last 2 years, my body had finally gotten to a healing place. My environment, my relationships, my friendships, my diet, my exercise, my lifestyle had gotten to a certain safe place where then I was able to truly go to the root places that cause, to me, in my belief, that cause sickness and severe disease or dis-ease, which is trauma, which is some of the experiences that we experience based upon bad people, places, programs, ideas. And most of them are in early childhood. Some of them came slightly later. I mean, they come from a plethora of places. Usually, some people had a bad parent, or they've been abused when they were young, or neglected, or they were raped, or just a host of different things. And sometimes it isn't even that severe, but severe enough on an emotional trauma level. But usually there's some form of trauma on the inside that corrupts self-identity and mass self-love with self-hatred.
This is like so deep. It's like almost like a course in psychology. And boy, you have really gone deep into this stuff, and I feel like we just talk forever about these things, but we kind of have to turn the corner and kind of wrap this up a little bit. And I just imagine you're talking to a guy named Rich who is 20 or 30 years younger, and they're in this, they're sitting in their bed, not able to open their eyes, or they're sitting in this dark place hearing this voice about suicide, or they're in this dark place where they haven't gotten sleep for several days. Why don't you give them hope and then tell them, what's a couple things that they should do that can get them out of this place? Talk to that person.
So if I was before this person, first of all, I would say, you are loved and you are worthy of love. And if you allow that simple seed by faith to root or plant in your mind, in the ground of your mind, in the spirit of your being, the floor of your heart, then at the ground level, that one seed over time will change everything. It's literally that simple. That one seed, that you are loved and you are worthy of love, and you receive it for yourself as self-love, as the identity of I am loved, it will change everything. Secondly, I would say that on the hope scale, it's really exciting. I mean, it's frustrating going through suffering year after year, especially when you're on the healing journey, because it's one thing to suffer decade after decade in ignorance and in darkness, in abuse and in suffering and trauma. And another thing when you start the healing journey and go, great, I know better, I do better, I'm willing, And now you're suffering sometimes even worse because to unroot stuff and change stuff, I mean, it all comes out at once, and it's horrifying at first. I mean, people experience all the time when they go on certain specific diets. They feel worse when they go on the diet. So initially you go through the suffering. But I can say 7 years down the line that coming into true health, it's just priceless. I would definitely do over all these 38 years before to live in this 39th year of health and opportunity, and just be at the doorstep of pure health and potential from a health place. Because now my lifestyle, when I enter into this pure health place, there's no old trauma, there's no bad people around, it's a floor ground where the whole garden and everything in the garden is beautiful. And now we're looking at how we could even do more and live a even more glorious life. And so the potential is fascinating. And lastly, I would say that to me came in view when I came through Atlanta, and I had always been told, oh, if you don't make it in the industry by this age, you might as well quit. And I came from communities where the life expectancy was 35 to 45. But then when I became completely sick and my body collapsed and I returned back to Oregon, I'm surrounded by people. So I'm only 32 years old at that moment, and I'm surrounded by people who were just beginning to live their best life at 50. They had just woken up one day and said, you know what? I'm going to start eating well, running marathons. And so they were just beginning. They were just I almost say they're hitting their peak, but it's not their peak. They were just getting started. They were just hitting their stride. Right. And I thought, wow, people could start at 50 and live with better health, vitality, able to run marathons and live really exciting lives. And I'm over here at 32 and I'm almost dead. I have nothing but life ahead of me. And then finally, when I ended up in Montana, I'm seeing people in their 80s, literally talking to people in their 80s who are camping, going hiking, figuring out what they're going to do with the next 20 years of the final stage of their life, saying, you know, I've had so many lives, and now I'm just deciding what to do with the next 20 years. Now, it's a new chapter, the last chapter maybe. What should I do now? I'm thinking, gosh, I'm just hitting, I'm not even 40 yet. I mean, I have massive life ahead of me. So I would tell this person that they have to be brave enough to accept the seed of love so they can be able to act out better decisions in their lives, so their thoughts begin to change. Their beliefs begin to change. They begin to ask for what they need instead of denying themselves before they've even asked. They change the relationships, the dynamic of their relationships, or their relationships entirely. They maybe even change their occupations because they say, you know what? Who said I had to be that? Who said just because I had that talent, why am I forcing myself to follow through even though I feel terrible, even though I feel sick? Let me choose something that resonates with making me feel better. So the decisions change. And of course, then you start choosing better foods. Food is so important. This would be truly the last point. This is a paradigm shift for me. So even throughout this journey, right foods got me on the right track, but then there was this seed. It's a psychological, societal idea that society congregates around bad food. And so if you want to be a part of society, if you want friendship and relationship and to go out and have fun, you have to be able to consume bad food. And if you can't, then you're a bad person. So you're the wrong one. You're the ugly one. You're the outsider. You're not good enough. So somehow when I began to eat well and feel good, I couldn't go out with friends because I had diet restrictions. And so, you have diet restrictions? You're not good enough to hang out with us, even though they were going out to eat horrible food. So it's a terrible psychological mishap, when the truth is that I'm not eating good food to get healthy, to return back to bad places with the storage capacity of being able to handle bad food. I'm not becoming well so I could go back to bad places. and have a defense mechanism that allows me to consume some bad things, bad friendships, bad relationships, bad conversations, bad food. So that was the paradigm shift. This is not a journey to become well so you can go back. This is a journey to stay well and find something new.
That is like an incredible twist on how society looks at people who are going through health issues. Really, when you overcome this, you're going to be stronger, healthier person than almost everybody around, because of that you were forced into these positive habits that some of us who are kind of dilly-dally around with poor food choices and poor attitudes, but for you is like right on the edge of do it or die. For many of us, we're still like out there floundering around, and so that's an amazing thought. Hey, Rich, we got to wrap this up. We're going a little bit over time, but one thing I don't feel like I got enough out of you was go back to that guy, that Rich from 20 years ago, and what are some specific things? You did mention food. You said the right food got you on the right track. Was there others, just in a couple minutes, what was a couple key things that brought you from the swamp to being relatively healthy?
I honestly believe that people, and unfortunately this is going to sound generic, but the thing that saved my life initially was cutting off people, places, things, beliefs, and ideas that no longer resonated with a new seed of truth that I was going to have to accept. People don't consider how much influence is a detox, how much influence is a detriment to our decision making. So even Napoleon Hill talks about how the mind is an antenna, and your unconscious mind is listening and taking in things that your conscious mind hasn't even observed, and then utilizing that information to make other decisions. So cutting out things is the beginning to accepting good things. That there's no other way around it. If you want health and you surround yourself by the same old habits, routines, people, places, and things, you will not have health. It will ultimately defeat your efforts.
Man, Rich, I feel like we could just maybe we should do a part 2 of this, but this is some amazing stuff. And it's there's so much hope in this message that you have about coming back from the abyss and becoming a healthy person. If somebody wants to get in touch with you to maybe get into this deeper, are you working on any projects that you can talk about, or is there a phone number or an email or a website that they can visit where they can get more plugged into what you're doing and get on a healthy journey?
Absolutely. So I've been working on developing this project. I'll leave the name out of it for now, but it's basically a master life plan. And so the program is existing and it's working, but I've already begun to start to speak to people on my newsletter. And so I have a group there, and my website just launched, the blog, and where they can sign up to get some more information to be a part of the community. And it's at richvaliant.com. I know this will be in the show notes, but I'll just quickly spell it out. It's Rich as in R-I-C-H, and Valiant, V-A-L-I-A-N as in Nancy, T as in Tom.com. Valiant's like bravery. Richvaliant.com. It's exciting to be on your podcast. You're setting the stage and the platform for people to meet and introduce new ideas. And if someone's on my kind of journey, I would love to share ideas with them. So by all means, come on down.
Great. Well, Rich, it's been so fun visiting with you, and I see this bright future for you, and you've done such a good job. And if somebody wants to get in touch with Rich, check his website out, richvaliant.com.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
You've been listening to the 4 Pillars of Men's Health with Dave Skattum. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit the4pillarsofmenshealth.com.